in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Hello students, once again, and welcome to this class of Business Studies with me. In the last class, students, we were doing the chapter of directing, in which we learned the concept of supervision, leadership and motivation, and in today's class we will be looking at the last element of directing, that is communication. So in this part of the chapter, we will try to understand the meaning of the concept of communication. We will also learn what is the two types of communication, in particular the formal informal communication. We will understand the barriers to communication and how to overcome these barriers. So what is communication, students? Right now, I am communicating to you. I am the sender and you are the receiver of this communication. There is a message that is being communicated, that is being spoken. The message includes some idea, some concept, some thought process, some opinion that the sender puts across either through words, usage of words, expression, and some kind of verbal, non-verbal factors. It may be in written form, it may be in non-verbal form. For example, students, if I just stand here quietly and look at the screen, am I communicating something? If I make big eyes, if I just don't say a word and look at you, will that also communicate something? You may find sometimes this happens. So communication necessarily need not mean usage of words only. When we want to say something, sometimes we may use a non-verbal form of communication, which also constitutes communicating some sort of a message. So in directing, why is communication important? Because we are communicating what is to be done, how it is to be done to the worker, right? We are telling the worker what is to be done, how it is to be done, and we are trying to instruct and guide the worker. We are instructing and guiding, counseling the worker what is to be done and to do it in the best possible manner. To get this done, we need communication. And that brings us to this element and meaning of communication. If you look at this, most common way to communicate, either we speak or we do it in writing or through our visual images. If I show you a picture and ask you to look at it, it will communicate something which you will start to comprehend. You are the receiver. When a communication is put across, the receiver starts to comprehend, tries to break down that message and tries to understand what is the sender trying to say. It may be in writing, it may be an image, maybe body language, just standing with folded hands, for example, and the manner if I smile at you or if I look angry at you, I am communicating something. Obviously, if I stand with my hands folded and give you a hard stare, you will say, Miss is angry. Miss seems to be very stern today. Whereas if I come in and if I just say, smile like this at you, you will say, okay, Miss is, she's smiling. She's in a, there is calmness. That means our body language is also communicating something. We also use communication while speaking. Like right now, I am speaking to you. I am using gestures. I am using expressions. These are ways that we use to communicate. When a manager is communicating to his employee, he is doing exactly all of this. He is speaking to his subordinate. Sometimes it is one-on-one speaking. Sometimes as a team he speaks to his entire team of employees, or it could be in writing. Maybe he sends down an order in writing to his subordinate what work is expected of him or her. Or it could be while walking across itself through the body language gestures, he is giving a clear indication or speaking to the person, visual images. So these are ways that the manager uses to communicate to his subordinate. So what communication brings us to understand is, it is derived from the Latin word communis, which means common. Communication stands for sharing of an idea in common. It is the process by which verbal, non-verbal symbols are sent, received and given meaning. So in simple words, communication means exchange of messages between two or more persons. The message may include any idea, a fact, some opinion like I said, some information, some instruction, understanding and anything that conveys a meaning. While directing, the ability of the manager depends on his communication skills. Why this is said, student, is because if communication is not proper, it may lead to some kind of misunderstanding. If the manager is not able to communicate the idea, the work, the opinion properly, what is to be done, he fails to explain properly what is expected, then it causes more a confusion in the mind of the worker. And remember, one more aspect is that the worker sometimes is not as comfortable to speak up and say to the manager, can you repeat, I didn't understand. How many of us would do that? Sometimes we are filled with fear, what he'll think, what he'll say, let it be, it's better I keep quiet, right? These things happen where the worker chooses to keep quiet, and that misunderstanding will reflect in the work, when he will not be able to do it properly or will be feeling more challenged while doing that work because he is now confused. What did the manager actually mean? This goes to show, students, that when we are instructing our workers, communication is very important. Sometimes the manager may try to complicate the communication by using very high-ended words. His vocabulary may be very good, but necessarily need not be used when he is talking to a subordinate. So by these situations, what is arising is a misunderstanding. Okay, let me put this aside and ask you, sometimes you receive a message on your phone. We receive messages on the phone, and if it is written in short forms, the sender has typed it and sent it. While decoding, that is, while trying to understand what is the message, we as a receiver start reading that message. Sometimes we fail to understand those short forms and we may understand something else only. Is that not possible? Does that not happen? Yes, this happens, and this is what leads to miscommunication, misunderstandings. There is no clarity in that communication. See, when we are directing our workers, like from the beginning we are saying, we are instructing them, guiding them, we are telling them what is to be done. We are supervising their work, we are counseling them. For all of this, we need good communication skills. So this is why organizations emphasize on improving communication skills of managers as well as of employees. So it is a process by which people create and share information with one another in order to reach common understanding. Once again, students, read the highlighted words on this slide which explains and summarizes the meaning of communication. It means exchange of messages between two or more persons. There is always a sender and a receiver in a communication process. The sender is sending the message either in writing or through a usage of words, or through a visual, that is an image, or through a body language gesture. The receiver is decoding the message, trying to understand, trying to comprehend what the sender is passing the message. This message can be what, students? It can be anything that conveys a meaning, and a fact, an opinion, some information, and bringing about some enlightenment to that individual. Yes, so now we move ahead with the broad classification of communication. So communication in the organization's context can be formal communication or informal communication. What is formal communication? Right now, I am formally presenting to you this chapter. I am formally presenting to you this chapter. That means it is something related to work. This is an individual example. From the organization's context, what is formal communication? It flows through official channels designed by the management. It relates to work, communication which relates to work. It can happen between the superior subordinate, it can happen between subordinate superior, or between superiors themselves. But the communication, what they are talking about, is always related to work. So any communication related to work is classified as a formal communication. The communication may be in oral or written. But generally, students, when it is formal communication, it is generally in writing because it is official in nature. It relates to work. So it is always substituted in writing also, not just verbally informed, because it will be recorded and kept for future usage. So this is what is a formal communication. It may be vertical or horizontal. It depends who you are communicating with. If you are communicating some work related to work to your same level individual who is working in your same department, okay, then it is within your level. Sometimes you may, that is horizontal, same level, someone who is at your own level. One subordinate is discussing work with another subordinate, okay, whereas you may be a subordinate at a lower level. You are communicating regarding work, giving some information about work to your superior, lower to higher, or superior is talking about work to his subordinate, or superior is talking about work to his subordinate. This is up and down, right? Person from a higher position is communicating to a person at a lower position about work. That is a vertical communication. Okay. So this is the concept of formal communication, but we are not concentrated on the level of communication. We must learn first the meaning. What is the meaning of formal communication? What is the meaning? It flows from official channels designed by the management. It always relates to work. It is a communication which takes place between either superior subordinates or between subordinates themselves, but it always relates to work. Now that is the meaning of a formal communication. So now what is informal communication? Informal, talking about anything not related to work, talking about or communicating something which is not related to work. Sometimes it is done out of our social interaction with each other. Okay? This communication arises out of the need of the employee to exchange their views, which cannot be done through formal channels. For example, sometimes it may relate to your views and opinions related to work, but you will not do it in an official manner. It is something informal. You are talking to your subordinate, to your friend in the canteen about something related to the day's work. That is informal communication. Now what happens with informal communication? It is observed that sometimes rumors are spread, sometimes stories are created which may not be always true. So workers chit-chatting in a canteen about the behavior of a superior, discussing about the rumors that some employees are likely to be transferred, These kind of discussions happen in the canteen while having your lunch break, tea break, coffee break. They talk with each other. Informal communication is going on, interaction between the subordinates in an informal way. This is informal communication, takes place between the people belonging to the same level, arises out of the need to exchange your views and opinions. So, I hope informal communication is clear. Now, one concept is said that informal communication is also called as grapevine network. Have you seen a bunch of grapes, students? It is on a bunch there are so many grapes which are attached. This communication is sometimes referred to as grapevine network, primarily because it is said that when this gossip or this talk is going on, this news spreads like wildfire between them. Why will management be interested in an informal communication? Why will management be interested in informal communication? Because formal communication is related to work. Here we are getting the views and opinions that are being discussed informally in between the workers. So, it is good to know what is the response, what is the opinion, what are the views of those workers. How can you get to use this? Well, you will get a feedback. If the manager can manage to convince any one of the employee, okay, and find out what is the opinion being spoken behind in the canteen or when they are chit chatting, you will get to know what is going on in the mind of the worker. You will be able to know what is going on between them and how you could use that information to either improve the situation or to take note of what is happening in the organization. So, this is informal communication, also called as grapevine network. Now, let us look at one very important aspect of communication, that is called as barriers to effective communication. The word barriers, student, means a block, a hindrance, some kind of hurdles that occur while communicating. For example, now I am communicating to you. The hurdle could be either your attention, either the noise in the background, either the clarity of the speech, either the words that I am using, or it could be many other factors that block the communication process to happen effectively. When is communication effective? When whatever is spoken is well understood by the receiver. Sometimes it can happen that in the communication process, the receiver is not able to understand clearly, or he may be confused, he may be totally blocked out due to several reasons. So, that is exactly what we want to learn, that is what we want to understand. Why in management do we learn about barriers to effective communication? Once again, students, don't forget, we are learning about how to be effective in management. We are learning how to be effective in management, and the best way to be effective in management is, first of all, get communication skills right. If we are able, because we are directing our employees, we need to have good communication skills and not cause, I told you, confusion in the mind of our employees, not create any doubts in their minds. So, let us understand what are these barriers that rise in the communication process and block the communication from being effective. As you can see here, the manager is talking, but there is one big wall which you can see which the employees on the other hand. So, what is a barrier? A barrier is a block, a hurdle, a hindrance that is stopping the communication from being effective. Now, let us look at different kinds of barriers. There are different classification of kinds of barriers. We will be looking at 4. We will learn 4. There are many more barriers, students, but from our exam and from our syllabus point of view, we will learn these 4 barriers, namely semantic barrier, organizational barrier, psychological barriers and personal barriers. So let us understand each of this in detail. If you look at that image there, one individual is saying something. There is a conversation between the two going on. The other person seems to be having many questions in his mind. Basically, what are those questions? They are blocks, hindrances, right, which are being caused due to some sort of barrier in the communication process. This will lead to communication to be ineffective. We don't want communication to be ineffective. We want communication to be completed and in proper way effective. So let us understand first what causes those blocks. Let us understand what causes these blocks in communications, and then we look at how to resolve this. So first one, semantic barriers. What are semantic barriers? Semantic barriers are also called linguistic barriers, language barriers caused due to inappropriate use of words. Maybe you are using as a manager too many technical words. Just imagine, okay, someone who is a computer IT professional is explaining to a subordinate who is in accounts department everything about that technical aspect in IT to that accountant who is not knowing anything technical about computers. Will it make sense to him? Will he be able to understand clearly what that IT professional is telling him? You have to see to whom you are talking, at what level that person is, what is his background qualification, and then communicate accordingly. Bring yourself to that person's level. If you are talking to someone who is subordinate to you and you want a certain work to be done, then first understand his qualification, his background. Simply you should not go and start talking in high funda language and words and confuse that person more or create some miscommunication. So semantic barriers happen when managers when managers use words which are very difficult while talking, or it also can happen, student, if the manager writes something and expects the subordinate to decode that written message, but he has used a lot of technical words or symbols with different meanings in it. There can be a confusion that he is not able to comprehend and decode that. That again will lead to a miscommunication. Later on you are expecting him or trying to make him understand why you have not understood. That is a wrong thing to do. So here you go, semantic barriers are concerned with problems and obstructions in the process of encoding and decoding into words and impressions. These are an account or a result of wrong words, faulty translations, different interpretations. These are the points that cover semantic barriers, students. You must have played that game when you were small. My knowledge of it is called broken telephone, where you sit in a chain and you pass a message to all and it goes from one person to the other. One person starts a message quietly in the other person's ear, but when the final message is said, it is a big joke because it is a distorted message, completely different message. That is a game, of course, and we enjoy laughing and enjoying over it. But in an organization context, students, we are doing some work related things here, and it can happen same way that manager tells some work to be done and it is not understood properly by the subordinate. Okay, it is not understood properly. Go to see something else only happens. Okay, the outcome is work is not accomplished. Okay, so let us understand what are these semantic barriers. Just generally, firstly, badly expressed message. If I as a manager I am using too much complicated words, too difficult words while I am talking to you as my subordinate, I am causing the confusion in your mind. I am responsible first of all. As a manager, be careful, students, that you use proper words, completed statements, not incomplete statements. Complete your statements. Be careful with the choice of words that you are speaking. You should not be the cause of the confusion and miscommunication. Faulty translations. What is this, students? See, some of us are very fluent in a particular language. Some of us are not so fluent. For example, if the manager has given some message, written work in and sent it to you, and you are translating it in Konkani, or let us say you are translating it in Hindi, you may change the meaning of certain words. Faulty translation. The whole meaning may change because you are decoding it in your own mother tongue, in your own comfortable language. That is called faulty translations. Sometimes workers tend to do that. They are trying to decode that message in their own language, and that sometimes causes a miscommunication. What are technical jargons? Like I mentioned to you, someone talking too much of technical words to someone who is not qualified at all in that field. Like a computer professional talking to someone, telling him everything about a technical problem in the, suppose the accountant is having a problem with the desktop. He informs IT. IT is coming here and saying, this is gone wrong, motherboard is wrong, system, software, something. For the accountant, the desktop is not working. He doesn't know the technical aspects of it, and this IT person is telling him, you should have done like this or that. This causes more a difficulty. This is causing more a confusion because you are using too many technical words while talking to somebody. While communicating work to be done, be careful. Don't tend to be too technical, especially if the person is not qualified to understand your technical words. If he is of the same level student, if he is of the same background level and you are talking that to him, it's understandable. He will understand you, he will know what you are talking. The receiver will be able to clearly indicate what you are talking, but you have to be at the same level or have a background knowledge in that technical field. But if you are someone who has no knowledge of that technical field and that superior is talking too much of technical words to you, then this is the problem called technical jargons that arise. Symbols with different meanings and unclarified assumptions. What is unclarified assumptions? I tell you, go and do this work. Go and do this work. I expected you to do the entire work. Go to see you finished only one file and left it there. At the end of the day, I am firing you and saying, why didn't you finish the work? You will say, I thought you said finish that work. So, I thought one file. What did I say? Finish the work. I have just made a general statement. I have not clarified myself clearly to you what I expected. What have I landed doing? I have caused a miscommunication. Can this happen in a management structure? Can it happen in the organization? Very much it happens, students, where managers tend to make statements and don't clarify it clearly, and it leaves a block in the mind of the subordinate and work doesn't get done the way it should be done. That's called an unclarified assumption. Symbols with different meanings I have already explained. We may use some way of writing certain messages, some words, symbols, and the person is not able to understand what it really means. Body language and gesture decoding. What is body language gesture decoding? A manager, when he is walking towards the employee, the way he walks towards the person, whether he is walking very fast, swiftly, stern and angry, whether calm, whether he is coming there with his fierce, angry looks, or he is in a what frame of mind, that also is reflecting some sort of communication, which may sometimes block communication. When that person comes close to you and starts to explain, you are so blocked that you are not registering what that person is speaking to you. It can happen that the manager does like this to the subordinate, where he comes with such kind of outlook and he is looking and he is explaining, but by then you are on a shutdown mode, you are already blocked out, and that barrier stops you from understanding what that manager is trying to speak. So, once again students, semantic barriers are badly expressed message, faulty translations, technical jargons, symbols with different meanings, unclarified assumptions, body language and gesture decoding. All this is arising out of the improper use of words and our vocabulary in communicating to each other. What are psychological barriers? As you look at it, the sender, the receiver, message is conveyed, but he is with a big question mark, not understanding. Psychological barriers are emotional barriers. Okay? A worried person cannot communicate properly. An angry person cannot receive the message properly. The state of mind of the receiver and sender is very important for effective communication. So also in the organization, the state of mind in which the manager is communicating to his subordinate is very, very important. The mindset is important, whether you are in a calm frame of mind, whether you are in a proper state of mind when you are communicating. So psychological barriers also are a part of a block or a hurdle that arises in our communication process. So there are 4 psychological barriers that we are looking at. One is a premature evaluation, second is lack of attention, third is loss by transmission and poor retention, and fourth is distrust. See students, sometimes when we look at individuals itself, just by the look of individuals, we tend to prejudge them. Premature evaluation, this sort of thought process, state of mind blocks the communication, and if that same person comes towards us, we do not clearly listen or perceive that information in the manner in which he is saying, because we are prejudging that individual's mindset. First only we look at a person and we are judging that person beforehand. Premature evaluation, lack of attention. Sometimes teacher is teaching, our attention may be there, and sometimes we are drifted. Same thing for a manager. Manager is talking to employee, employee may be distracted. What causes distraction? There are many reasons for distraction. For an employee, he may be sick. He may be worried about his family member who is not so well at home. Maybe he is worried about his child or his brother, his sister, his family member. Maybe he is worried about the future. Something is bothering him. When a person is in a worried state of mind, will he be in a state to receive the information? No. So lack of attention also arises due to different reasons. This attention blocks him from understanding the message clearly. What is loss by transmission and poor retention? Loss by transmission and poor retention means sometimes in the organization, message passes through many levels. When the message passes through more levels, the message tends to get distorted, tends to get miscommunicated. Poor retention simply means unable to remember information. Sometimes manager is telling you complete the work, but you cannot remember, recall information. Poor retention means unable to remember information, to recall information. That is again due to the state of mind of a person. And lastly, distrust. Sometimes there is no trust between the manager and subordinates. Manager is talking, but you don't believe what the manager is saying is, you don't understand it clearly. Similarly, when the subordinate is communicating to the manager, he just doesn't trust that person's words. Looking at that person, we are saying, no, we don't want to believe this person. There is some sort of a block that hinders this communication. This distrust that is built between manager and subordinate causes a block in communication process. So I hope you are clear with what are psychological barriers. They are nothing but emotional barriers caused between the sender and receiver. Generally results out of the state of the mind of the person. If he is worried, if he is angry, if he is not well, he or she will not be able to understand or comprehend that message clearly, and that causes a block in the communication process. Once again students, we have seen premature evaluation, lack of attention, then we looked at loss by transmission, that is when the message passes through many levels, and poor retention simply means not able to remember things, and lastly distrust between the manager and the subordinate. Okay, now we are proceeding with the next kind of barrier called organizational barriers. Organizational structure greatly affects the capability of the employee students as far as communication is concerned. So, some of the major blocks that organization themselves cause is the policies. If they are too rigid, there are too many rules and regulations. The status, that is, if the manager exerts that only he is the one who can say something, communicate something, that he has the sole authority and makes it a one-way communication. Sometimes status also causes a block in communication. Complexity again here implies if there are too many levels through which the message is passing through, then there is a possibility of the message getting distorted. And lastly, the organizational facilities. Organizational facilities include things like suggestion box, which we may keep and encourage people to give their suggestions. But if these facilities where we are not encouraging workers to speak up, it may cause a block in communication. If we don't give them a platform to express their views, their opinions, their suggestions, then we are causing a block in the communication process. So, the factors related to the organization structure, the authority relation, the rules, regulations may sometimes act as barriers to effective organization caused by organization. And we have already gone through the organizational barriers. Once again, the policies, secondly, the rules and regulations of the organization. Sometimes there are too many rules and regulations. The status, that a manager tries to impose his position in the organization too much and he hinders the communication process by not allowing his subordinates to speak and talk. Complexity in the organization structure here means if there are too many levels through which the message is passing through, then it is going to lead to a block in the communication process. Organizational facilities here are giving a platform for the employees or subordinates to speak their opinions. You may provide something like a suggestion box, but if you don't have these kind of facilities, it may hinder the communication process. Now, let us go to personal barriers, which is one of the last barriers to communication process. Now, the personal factors of both sender and receiver may influence the communication process. Sometimes, okay, personal barrier is something that comes from within. The manager and employee both have some kind of thought process which is going to cause a barrier to that communication process. Let us understand how. If you look at the very first one, fear of challenge to authority. In this context, what does it mean? Sometimes students, the manager himself may be afraid that his subordinate knows much more than him. Sometimes he feels this subordinate is much more smarter than himself. So, what he tends to do? Because he fears that his authority will be challenged or he will be made to feel small, what he chooses to do is not allow that subordinate to talk or give his opinion or suggestions. Because he thinks and he knows that that subordinate is a little better than him. So, that is your first personal barrier, where if a superior perceives that a particular communication may adversely affect his authority, then he or she may withhold or suppress such communication, not allow that person to talk. There are 5 members under you, 5 employees under you, okay. Because you know that person A is well versed, gives good suggestions and all that, what you will do? You will ask everyone else their opinion, but when it comes to that person, you will suddenly avoid that person's opinion, or when he speaks, you will just listen and then pass it to the next. What are you basically trying to do? Suppress this communication. You are blocking this communication. Why? Because there is fear of challenge to your authority. You feel in a way lesser in terms of your abilities. You feel that he or she is more better. Lack of confidence of superior on the subordinate. What does this mean? Sometimes superior does not have confidence on the ability of his subordinate. It happens. We don't have the faith in all our employees. Sometimes we like 1 or 2 employees and we constantly rely only on those 2 or 3 people. We don't give others a chance because there is some kind of lack of confidence that I as a manager may have on my subordinate, but that is again not correct. It causes a block and a hindrance in the communication system. So now students, we move ahead with the next point, unwilling to communicate. Sometimes a subordinate may not be prepared to communicate with his superior if they think that communication is going to adversely affect him. He may not want to give his opinion, his suggestion or his information. He chooses to keep quiet. The subordinate chooses to keep quiet rather than speak up. What is this causing, student? Is a block in the communication between the superior and subordinate. From whose end is this coming? It is coming from the subordinate's end, where he is choosing not to speak, where he is choosing to be quiet. He is not willing to give his words and his opinion because he thinks that it is going to affect his interest. Therefore, this also becomes a block to the communication process. Next is the lack of incentive. Sometimes it happens that the person is not motivated because there is no incentive offered. Okay? If there is no reward or appreciation for a good suggestion, the subordinate may not be willing to offer useful suggestions. If in a case of an example, if we look, there may be a team. And if we say, if you give a good suggestion, I will reward you, then the person may talk. Some people speak when there is some reward or some kind of incentive which is associated. If there is no incentive, they may choose to keep quiet. So these are called personal barriers. Once again, fear of challenge to authority, okay, unwilling to communicate, lack of proper incentive, and no confidence of the superior on the subordinate. So moving ahead, now we have understood, students, what are the 4 different kind of barriers. Once again, there are semantic barriers. What are semantic barriers? They are language barriers caused due to inappropriate use of words or incomplete statements, symbols with different meaning, faulty translations, technical jargons that may arise. That is semantic barriers caused in the communication process. Or we can have psychological barriers. What are psychological barriers? Emotional barriers. Arises when due to the state of mind of the sender and receiver, sometimes due to lack of attention, premature evaluation and distrust. There is a lot of loss of transmission, loss of retention. That causes psychological barriers. We are unable to recall information. Sometimes we are not attentive when the person is talking to us. Again, that causes a block in communication. Teacher is talking, we are in our own mind. Maybe we are not well, maybe something we are worried about. Again, are we listening effectively? No. Communication may not be effective. Manager is talking to subordinate, but the subordinate is occupied in his own thoughts. Again, that causes a barrier to communication. Then we looked at organizational barriers, and lastly we looked at personal barriers, how it causes a barrier or a hindrance to the effective communication. Now you understood, students, what are the different barriers. As a manager, take note of it. These are the barriers, these are the ways that communication becomes ineffective. We want to be effective in our communication. We want to make sure that this doesn't happen when we are communicating to our subordinate. That brings us to the last part of this chapter of directing, that is, how to overcome the barriers to communication. First we understood what causes it, now we want to learn how to overcome it. So these are the ways to overcome the barriers to communication. First and foremost, students, remember, I feel communication is not just important in our organization. I think this is a very relevant part of the chapter which relates even to your personal selves. Communication is the key to any relations. Interpersonal relations highly depend upon how well we communicate with each other. So let's just not relate to our book, which is also essential from syllabus point of view. Let us also take something that we should gain personally from it, which is to learn to be effective communicators. This is the way to be effective communicators. First and foremost, students, as a manager in an organizational structure, clarify the idea before communicating. Clarify yourself. Communicate according to the needs of the receiver. Always think, who am I talking to? What level is that person working at? What is his background, educational qualifications, what are his technical abilities? According to the person, to the level, talk according to that. Don't just simply rattle words out and then cause a miscommunication. So, second thing, communicate according to the needs of the receiver. Consult others before communicating. Get a fair idea about the thing before you start talking about it. Be aware of your language. Be aware of your tone. Be aware of the content of the message. How you are talking. What is tone, students? What is tone of your language? Screeching, shouting, high-pitched tone. You may feel that by using this tone you are being effective, then no. Sometimes you may lose the effectiveness in communication because you are not using the proper tone. So, be aware of your language, the choice of words, okay? Your body language, your gestures. Someone has come to talk to you. Let us say the employee has come to convey some grievance and problem and you are just looking down. Just looking down and so busy occupied in the file. Do you like this sight? Definite? No. Does this show that you are really interested in this person, this employee's words and his grievance? That person will be saying something and will walk away saying the manager is not interested in the problems that workers are facing. This is going to cause a bigger block. This is going to cause a bigger ineffective communication. That apart, it is going to distance the employee from the management. You should be able to be a good listener. Look at the last point, very crucial point. Be a good listener. How to be a good listener, student? By looking in the eye of the person. That could be one way. Now, when the person I gave you example came to talk and convey some grievance here or some situation, it is better I look at the person and listen, not look down, look at the person. Also, nod your head, not just stare there. Nod your head. Probably these gestures of nodding your head, your eye contact, your expressions will add up to effective communication. So, be a good listener, and listening can come by looking, maintaining eye contact, giving some nodding of your head which will show that you are listening to that person. Follow up communications, ask for feedback, revert back, what did you understand? Ask the person whether he or she understood by ensuring proper feedback. Convey things of help and value to your listeners and communicate for the present as well as for the future. When you are communicating, make sure that your communication is complete, not incomplete and cause a confusion. So, once again, what are the ways that we can overcome our barriers to communication? Clarify the idea. Communicate according to the needs of the receiver, be a good listener, ensure feedback, follow up the communication, communicate for present and future, be aware of your language, tone, gestures, content of the message, consult others before communicating. If we can do this, students, we can be effective in our communication with our subordinates and be also effective as individuals in our own life. So, this brings us to the closure of ways to overcome barriers to communication. Before I end, students, I want to leave you with this thought. Your positive action combined with positive thinking results in success. So, remember, your success is highly determined by your positive actions and positive thinking. I would like to leave you all students with 5 things which I am truly believe in, which our dear ex-President of India, Abdul Kalam, left for all of us. First of all, 5 lines, students, you can say to yourself, besides learning my chapter of directing. Make sure you go through everything in concepts, but this is for you also. Say, I am the best, I can do it, God is always with me, I am a winner, and today is my day. With these thoughts in mind, students, I wish you all the very best for your exams, all the very best for your future. Stay home, stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.
अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस। अब आपकी सुरक्षा आपके हाथों में। ल्यूपी सेफ हैंड सैनिटाइजर, आपका और चेन्नई सुपर किंग्स का फर्स्ट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस।